Hello, welcome to Protracking with Syphus. Put the mic on. There we go. How's that? Okay. Yeah, here we go. Tonight it's a Chiptune special. I hope I haven't oversold it with words like special. It's just that I stick chiptune in most of the keywords for plugging this stream, and I'm not always doing chiptunes necessarily on the stream so far. I've done a lot of jungle and drum and bass and not much chiptune, but I do a lot of chiptune in Protracker. I have done a lot of chiptunes in Protracker. It didn't become singular until about the last 15 years or something, but that's cool. I won't bore you with too much of the history other than to play some tunes by some of my favourite chiptune artists who've been writing these and calling them chiptunes since about 89, 90, and then just plugging away ever since and putting things out. I'll get Protracker running because yeah, we're back on the Amiga 600 tonight, which hasn't been seen on this stream since it crapped out and I hot swapped it for an Amiga 1200. And there's no really good reason to use the Amiga 600. I love it to bits. I love how compact it is. It's missing a whole keypad section, a good 5 inches that the A1200 has. Which means it's great for traveling with. I've taken it in hand luggage on planes and gigged with it all over the place. It's pretty slow. It's no faster than an Amiga 500. You can get more RAM in it. Well, yeah, sort of. Yeah, you can pack it out with as much RAM as the 500 plus, as much chip memory, and you can get accelerators for them and all sorts, but I don't really need that. It's a bit of a drag doing stuff in Workbench, copying large amounts of files and things, but mostly Protracker runs at the kind of speed I like, and I like the fact that it sits halfway between a 1200 and a 500. Doesn't really know what it is. It's got the extended chipset, which is not the AGA, the fancy graphics, the advanced graphics architecture that the 1200 has. And the OCS is the original chipset that the 500 has. And the ECS is it's quite a bit better in a number of ways, but it wasn't really supported widely enough. You often had to fight to get Amiga 500 games running on it, as you did with the Plus. None of that matters too much because we live in Protracker. We'll look at a few different ways of getting chip samples, including stealing them, because that's a time-honored way of getting chip samples as well. And we'll talk about what chip samples are and why there are samples involved in what most people now think of as something derived from sound chips. I said I wouldn't bore you with the history. I might bore you with that history again, just for the crack. Yeah, well, let's have it then. So chiptune as a genre now is associated with all sorts of platforms and all sorts of hardware. Game Boy got really big when LSDJ and Nanoloop cartridges software allowed people to write awesome Game Boy music and perform from that. Hey, Robert. And I mean, I've written a lot of chip music or chiptune style music commercially in the last 10-15 years for games, and you know, I'm not a purist. I don't have qualms about doing that style, but in a full DAW with DSP and reverb and delay and all sorts of effects. That's fine. It is a style. as with any style, any subgenre, you pick and choose elements of other styles that you want to do, and there are all sorts of chip tunes on the Amiga. There are funk chip tunes. There are ones that distinctly go for a kind of 80s pop style. There are ones that really are quite folky. There are a lot of Belgian and Dutch chip tunes and chip musicians who actually you can hear strains of 18th century folk melody in a lot of those tunes. That's a hobby horse I'll get back on later. And yeah, so it's kind of nice that now most people know what you mean when you say chiptune. It used to be that people didn't. And while a certain kind of purist who happens to be aware of some of the details might grumble about something getting popular, people always do. And I probably used to way back when this thing that I've been doing in the privacy of my own bedroom suddenly got popular. Hey, PS. Yeah, as a phrase, chiptune I think was first used to describe the kind of music that we're going to do tonight, and it was reminiscent. It was meant to be reminiscent of Commodore 64 music from earlier in the decade, at the end of the 80s. People like Turtle and Duz and Format started to make tunes as small as possible to fit in the ever decreasing amount of space that they had on cracked games. It was partly a technical exercise. It's all about showing off how small can you make a chiptune and how cool can you make it within these limitations. But also you could get a hell of a lot in just a few kilobytes if you looped very, very, very short samples, like 32 byte, 62 byte samples. And as I said before, it's not that there is a sound chip in the Amiga that has a distinctive sound. That's not how the Amiga works. The Amiga plays whatever sounds you put into it. But if you essentially treat that sound chip like a synthesizer and give it looping samples that you can treat like oscillators, then you add those together and you get this distinctive sound. And more than anything else, it's the effects in Protracker, which have been used and abused in certain ways, that give those chiptunes a characteristic sound, and which other software has emulated. Most platforms with sound chips, with the Texas Instruments and the Yamaha sound chips that the Mega Drive, the Genesis had, the chip in the Game Boy, which it's not really a chip, it's done on the CPU, I think. I could be wrong. I don't think there's a dedicated sound chip in the Game Boy, but there's an architecture to the way the channels are allocated. I'm getting outside of my expertise here, but there are the limitations that exist in this kind of music have been treated similarly on different platforms, especially with things like arpeggios. That's the classic one that everybody recognizes. Right, that's where you get a very short loop cycling around, usually 3, sometimes more notes to give the impression of a chord being played. Is actually what pianists would call a broken chord, and it's an arpeggio. I haven't done what I've keep meaning to do now, which is to play in with a tune, set the mood a bit, let people join. Looks like we've got a few people watching. Hi everybody who's just joined. And hey, I can't promise to give you a new Protracker tip every stream, but I'm going to give you one tonight, which is when you look at this, look where my mouse is, when you look at this dot on the screen, normally that cycles around volumes or paths that you've got saved in doskpop, which is here. That's how we got to. It's where we do file loading, sample loading, module loading. Some buttons do different things in Protracker when you right click first and then left click on them, so you can increment arrow up and down. So volume here on the sample settings goes up one at a time, down one at a time. You can increment in multiples of 10 if you put the right button down and then tap. That's nice for working quickly. And if you go on doskpop and right and left click on on there, on that dot, then you get a list of the volumes, which is really handy. So especially since you often need to force Protracker to read and reread a directory to be absolutely sure that you're actually in that directory. Otherwise you can accidentally save your module to the wrong path. You can accidentally load an outdated or a different file to the one you thought you were going to load and ruin the module that you've got. Lots of bear traps in directory up, and that's just the way it is. But I'm going to go into the data partition of the hard drive in this Amiga 600, which is called Files. Got a lot of stuff in here. Mod work might be where things are. No, 2019 PWS, Protracking with Syphus. Hi. In here I've got a few things that I've thrown together. I've got a directory of tunes by Mactone, a huge directory of awesome tunes by Mactone. We will look at him tonight. Radix, one of my all-time favorites. We'll look at him. We might not get to him tonight because I want to start with a very simple and stripped back style of chiptune, and then I'll move on to somebody like Radix, who is doing slightly different things, slightly less restricted things. In miscellaneous, we've got a bunch of stuff. We've got a cartoon one. Cartoon's amazing. Sierra. Most of his tunes were written in the 2000s onwards. Some absolutely lovely tunes. I suspect most of his favorite chip musicians are the same as my favorite chip musicians, and that's probably why I like his stuff so much. Lots of odds and ends in here. Some of this is straight up game music. Turrican. There's a Moby track there that's absolutely amazing, but it's not really a chip tune, so we won't look at that tonight. That's the one I played out on last time, Looney. That's really nice. Oh, really nice. It's nice to have nice things. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna load it back. It's one of my favorites. Highway by Cartoon. It's 8 kilobytes. That's pretty tiny. That's smaller than most things, almost anything you are saving, loading, sharing, reading, writing these days. Let's load it up and see what's in it. So, first thing you might want to do when you load up a module is look at the sample text, because the sample text is where somebody is likely to put a message in for you to read. Unless the module's been ripped from a demo or a crackthrow, then we've got song name, Highway, sample name, Trashed by Cartoon. And I'm just going to use the control key with my little finger and the arrow keys to go up and down the samples. Trashed by Cartoon. Original name, Highway. That is all this one says, short and sweet. Some kind of ASCII art going on in there. Just simple here, just hashes, but some players would list the sample names in a block so you could read them as a passage of text. So you can get quite a bit of ASCII art in there to add a bit of flair to your tune, which might be shared on a BBS, downloaded and played on a dedicated player, perhaps, rather than just a tracker. Although I've always listened to things in the tracker because I love the tracker. I love Protracker. It's cool. I like it just being on in the room, shining out, doing its thing. Let's have a look at the samples before I even press play. See how many samples we've got. There are 31 samples in a Protracker module, from 0 to 31. Does that make it 32? No. We start at 1. That's how it's displayed to us, not how it's counted in the binary. Not all of them are full, but they all exist even if they're empty. And there aren't any more hiding towards the end to go all the way up to 1F in hex. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 samples, 3 of them are drums. That's all you need. Yeah, so let's play them. Can you hear that all right? So I need to crank that up a bit. I'll have to ride these levels a bit until it's all good. That might be better. Right, really simple kick drum, really low frequency, low sample rate. And a very little hi-hat there, just a little burst of noise. Snare, and then a looping waveform. That is 7C. My hex isn't great, but it's pretty short. I can usually estimate what a hex is, and a hex number is in decimal up to about 40 if it's nice and even, or 64 maybe, but I'm getting a bit lost by that point. So it's a bass. Given the range that we've got here, highest note is up there and lowest is down here. My guess is he's going to be using that for a bass. I don't know who Cartoon is at all, actually. I don't know anything about Cartoon. I think he's a he, and I think he's Swedish, but both of those facts could be wrong. If anybody knows, please let me know. I'll go on amp.the scene. There might be an interview with him or her, but chances are for that time period it's very likely to be a he. Demo party, sausage party. And 2 high-pitched samples, octave apart, and one of them is a much lower volume than the other. We'll talk about why that's handy later on. Okay, I'm going to play the tune. Yeah. The loop point, and that'll go on forever. That's perfect. That's about 35 seconds looping. That's what you want. A tune like this would be playing as part of a crack throw often at the start of a pirated Amiga game or software app, usually a game. There'd be some scroll text in the background, probably a star field, maybe a nice font if there was enough space for it. Some messages from the Kraken team slagging off other Kraken teams, saying how they're the best. Usually the numbers of some BBS servers for you to log into and get knocked back from because you weren't elite enough to be there, that kind of thing. 4 channels, 6 patterns. Yeah, so let's analyze it a little bit before we start making our own. Melody going on in channel 1 there, and track 1, channel 1. So what I'm doing here is I'm using Alt and then the Z, X, C and V keys to mute and unmute different channels. There are only 4 channels to worry about, so these are the keys you need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll get rid of the rest of them. There may be an arcane long lost shortcut for soloing the one you're on, but I'm not sure if that's consistent across Protracker versions. Let's have channel 2. Pretty straightforward again, all the drums in 1 channel. Not that much crossover going on between them, and I'll explain what that means when we get to it. this is a great tune to analyze if you're learning how to make chiptunes in Protracker, because I think it's perfectly formed, but it's very easy to read what's going on. That channel is just the arpeggio going round and round. Again, it's not to pack more stuff in. You can throw drums into different channels and fit them in the space between other notes that you don't need, and you can do all these things to efficiently pack more in. But this is great because I think it's perfect and really straightforward. And all the drums are in one channel, and it's quite extensive drums for a chiptune like this. A lot of the time, we'll see this with Mactone. A lot of the time, if it's a square wave bass with a bit of punch on it, then that essentially does the job of the kick drum. If you tweak it right with the volume commands, and you really find that you get in the same kind of hit on the beat from the bass kicking in as you would from the drum. So you don't really need a drum as well. You can also stick a little bit of a kick drum right before your loop of square wave for bass, so you can pack those into one instrument essentially. And there's a lot of the Mactune ones I'll play which really only have a snare, and that's it. There's nothing else going on percussively, but your brain fills in the gaps and thinks, well, I can hear what the beat is and I can hear where the snare is. So your subconscious tells you that there's a full electronic kit going on in the background as well, but it's not. So when you see a drum pattern laid out like this, if you're in size coding mode, if you're in ultra optimization mode, then you think, well, this is profligate. This is very wasteful of space and data space, but it's grand. It does the job. It rolls along nicely. Yeah. Rog B, God, I love ARPs. Yes, he loves ARPs. Hey James, hi everybody. Let's go back and have a look at these ARPs. It's not, there we go. You can get fancy with the ARPs, or you can get not fancy, and these ARPs are not fancy, and that's fine. They're awesome. Let's take it all back together again so we can remind ourselves what it sounds like. So cartoons actually use quite a bit of restraint here. I don't use much restraint when I'm doing a chiptune, but the benefits of it come through in a tune like this. When I pointed out that these samples had quite a low volume, so the bass is volume 30 out of 40. Normally I whack everything to 40, and it's rarely that I'll bring something down to make things fit. But actually to start off, you know, if I was mixing, if I was doing a mixing job on a full DAW, I would start zero the faders and bring everything in. That's good practice. But in a chiptune, I just go for broke and whack everything to full. So it's bass at 30, which is quite a bit quieter than it could be. And then that lead line is 30, and then this, I think he's using for the ARP, is 12. And that gives the drums a lot of space to breathe. The drums are all in at 40. I mean, they're filling out the waveforms, so they're about as loud as drums would ever get in a Protracker module. But everything sits nicely in this mix. Those drums aren't lost at all. And like I said, it doesn't always matter if you do lose the drums. And if you're going to lose the drums, you should, if there's a drum that you're not hearing in the mix, but you're happy with the mix, you should lose that drum and use the space for something else, for an echo or a pattern delay or something. So I'll fire up Mactone mod now, and this would have been written quite a bit later. I suspect that tune, Cartoon Highway, would have been written between 90 and 92, I think. Can't be sure, but there's probably a copy of it out there that has the original file creation date on it. A lot of my modules still have the original file creation date. despite being copied and backed up and all the rest of it. I'll jump out of there and go to Mactone. So Mactone is Swedish. I don't know much about Mactone either. He hasn't been... I'm not sure which groups he's been in. I don't know if he's been in any groups that I know of, but a lot of his stuff's been used for Cracktros, and you would definitely have heard his chiptunes if you were ever pirating PC games in the early 2000s. If you pirated Grand Theft Auto 3 or Project IGI, and a whole host of creative applications and art stuff. I was at university. I had extremely fast broadband in the university library that at the time was completely unregulated. And I just had Kazaa running in there for quite a long time. But it was a really nice surprise to open some of these keygens and find a lot of these chiptunes sitting inside. So I don't know, I don't think Mactone was necessarily writing chiptunes way back, but he may have been. And these are a real work of art / crazy genius as far as I'm concerned. I run a few of these from the class installers, and you might recognize one or two if you're of a certain vintage. That's a trick. That's a trap. Because I discovered earlier that that's messed up. I'm not sure how, but let's go with class 1. So, quick go through the sample. Composed by Mactone for class Cracktro. So you compose this for the Cracktro. A lot of the time you'll find Cracktros and keygens will just grab, nick a bit of music that's out there. There's one of mine which is called Version with a Z, and it was used for True Piano VST, and there's a whole YouTube music poop video meme, or there was, it's not very popular now, but there were loads of people making videos where they sample replaced this mod. It was an XM fast tracker module, replacing it with meme things that I'm too old to understand, but yeah, True Piano's SK, I think was the name of that YouTube music poop video. Loads of people made them. So yeah, it's like I was pleasantly surprised to find that my tunes had found their way into that bit of the scene, which I'm not closely connected to. I've done a couple of tunes specifically for Cracktros, but they weren't, I think they were released as Cracktros, not specifically for the Wares scene. But much more in there. And again, there aren't many samples, don't need many samples. A couple of square waves. Big square wave. Okay, 3 drums in this one. Okay, let's hear it. didn't realize my sidechain compression was so yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, a trap. Rotoshiba. The trap was that it's either corrupt or it is more likely to be a WAV that I've converted at some time over the years, and the file name said .mod, but it probably really is .mod.wav, and we couldn't see it. So a file that you try to load as a mod that isn't a mod, because Protracker doesn't care about extensions. It just tries the headers and sees what happens, and it will let you load a file that it shouldn't, because it's up for anything, and it'll just overflow all the buffers and write junk to every register, and that's fine. You just have to load something else or reboot. So that's why that's a trap. But yeah, this one, Macton goes in for intros quite a bit, which is nice. Again, it's quite short. You heard the loop point there. I'll show you how to do those. Because the loop didn't go back to the beginning, the loop went back to position 4 or something. So let's meet some of these channels and see what we've got. So let's start in quietly, starting with a C06, which is, well, you go up to 40, and 40 is 64 in decimal, so 6 is quite quiet. And then he's using commands here to gradually increase that. It's not terribly smooth, but it doesn't need to be. Gives you the impression of fading in. That's all you need. Doing the same thing with this. There are 2 ways to do a fade in on lots of individual notes like this with a pattern delay. We've talked about pattern delay before, but I'll cover it again quickly. If you want a delay effect, like you get in Ableton or Fruity Loops, you can't have it. You can't have it because there's no DSP here. You can do what delay is, which is the same thing happening again a bit later and a bit quieter. And not only can you do that, but you can save some space by doing that in the same monophonic channel as the original thing. So the original one is here, and then the repeat of it is here. I can't demonstrate it very well because the fade-in's happening at the same time. So there's a lot of stuff going on in here. I'm not sure whether he typed these in manually or used a trick, which I'll show you later. But you can hear the repeat note coming a few lines later. If you do this a lot, which I do, you get into the habit of thinking kind of melodically, but with a sort of backwards leapfrog all the time. So you can kind of type in one of those lines as you go. If you don't want to do the lazy trick, which I'll show you later. And I usually don't do the lazy trick, as I said before on this channel. Find it quite therapeutic to do things with an unnecessary amount of faff. If I didn't, then I wouldn't be using Amigas to make music in 2019. So not only has he got pattern delay in there, but he's doing another delay of the whole channel, which has some really lovely DuckTales on the Game Boy vibes. I'm sure you'll agree if you know what I'm talking about. Very nice. That's the kind of thing you might as well do if you've got a spare track, and he does have a spare track because the melody isn't playing yet. So like the cartoon mod, he's got a pretty fleshed out drum pattern going on in one channel, but he's starting to do what I was talking about before with finding any free space to stick in something that needs to go there, or that can go there without disrupting anything else. And in this case, it's a little ARP. So you can go through line by line and preview notes in Protracker by hitting Enter or Return. Unfortunately, it doesn't preview the effect, so you won't hear an ARP by doing that. You have to really play the pattern through to hear the ARP. You can also, not many people know this, but you can use backspace to preview backwards, like that, if you want to. It's quite handy sometimes. Syphus, I'm a noob. Cool. Well, like no matter how long you've been doing this, occasionally you'll open a module where somebody does something that you've never seen done before, and it blows your mind, and you're the noob all over again. It happened to me quite recently, actually. I can't remember why. It might have been a Mactone tune that I hadn't heard before. Let's get another Mactone tune open. All of these class ones are class. That's a good one. Sorry if you heard me opening another bottle of Pepsi. Anyway, yeah, so a lot of stuff going on in there. Might sound very similar to before, but that's cool. If you do something well, you should keep doing it. One thing that might have stood out is the key changes, gratuitous key changes. I am a sucker for these. I do them all the time. Most composers consider it a cheesy option of last resort. I don't care. I just throw them in all over the let's just transpose that up a semitone or a full tone or a fifth or a fourth or anything, and yeah, so I'm all about that. And then it's nice to be able to drop down from there and really you turn what's effectively after the intro, it's about 8 or 12 pattern tune, and it makes it listenable way beyond the 90 seconds or so that it actually lasts for. And if it doesn't, then you probably shouldn't be watching the Chiptune special. Not for you, but hey. Yeah, so let's clear this out and do a chiptune of our own. So how do you get chip samples? Well, you saw those chip samples, they were pretty tiny. In some trackers, not this one, in the modern Mac and PC version of this tracker, which you should check out if you can't be bothered to either get hold of Amiga hardware or set up an emulator, that's fine. It's free, 8-bit Bubsy, Google 8-bit Bubsy, all one word, Bubsy, not Bizby or Busby. B-U-B-S-Y. He did a port to Mac and PC SDL port. It works very well, very stably, and it lets you draw a sample right into that box. You hold down a key, you draw the mouse around, you draw your waveform, which is awesome. Fast Tracker 2 lets you do that as well. Does it? Milky Tracker does. And that's one way to create them. Open Milky Tracker. You can export modules from Milky Tracker, draw a load of waveforms, and then come back. But we're going to pretend it's, because I'm always pretending it's 1992, we're going to pretend it's 92 and that we don't have that option available to us. So last session, or the session before last, I spent a lot of time in a text editor writing a waveform by putting in ASCII characters, which will be read by Protracker as their binary bits, or their binary bytes, and assigned to a high or a low amplitude. And that's one very time-consuming way of doing it. And at the end of that session, NE7 of Triad, Andy, sent me the text for a perfect sine wave, which is very kind. I'm going to use that in one of the jungle sessions, because there's no point in having a sine wave that takes up more than about 64 bytes. Yeah, no, the resolution of the playback isn't going to give up your secrets there. So I'm not going to do that tonight. It takes ages, and it's kind of, I have to admit, it's a waste of time. The very easiest way, the punk way, the getting shit done way, is to just load up a bit of binary or anything. Tell Protracker it's a sample. Protracker doesn't care if it's not a sample. I'm going to go to files. I'm looking for maybe a text file or a manual or something. KingCon, that's a shell extension program. These info files, they're not usually so useful. Find directory. God, the path might be too long. Oh no, we're in. Okay. Docs, that's a good one. Well, sometimes binary. The Protracker binary itself. Actually, let's do that for old time's sake. So if you got a floppy disk with Protracker on it and nothing else, no samples, you didn't have a sampler, you got this floppy disk in the playground, all you had was your Amiga and a bunch of WESD games, and somebody gave you a Protracker floppy, or you swapped it, or you nicked it, or something, then you probably would realize before too long that you could just stick the binary executable. These three are executables. They're different builds of the same program, Protracker 2.3e. I'm going to stick that one in here. It'll only take the first 64 bytes. An instrument can be 127 bytes, but most of the players don't understand or don't allow samples that are that long. So we're going to stick to 64, and I think this version cuts it off at 64. Let's play it and see what it sounds like. I'm going to turn it down because it's going to sound like that. Yes, it is. Well, we can work with that. It's way, way more than we need. Nope, Amiga doesn't care. Until it does once in a blue moon, and then you think, oh, fuck. Like the info things, but that's just later versions of Workbench. It's not the real thing. So I'm going to cut all of that away. I don't need that. I'm going to cut this away. I don't need that. This is still far too long. Look at that, it's huge. I need all these bytes. I'm going to chop that out. I'm just selecting stuff, I'm dragging, clicking and dragging, and then I'm going down to cut and getting rid of it. You can use the keyboard shortcuts for that, but I tend, for some reason in this window, I tend not to use shortcuts as much, because there's more that can go wrong, and I'm a bit more nervous about it. Now, will that show me, will edit up show me the range? Yeah. I'm going to cut all of that out. That's the kind of range I want. That's the kind of sample length I want. So, so if the replen is the length of your loop is 64. Get rid of everything else. It's a pretty manky sample, but it's a sample. There are bits that go up and bits that go down around the central point. That's what you need. That's what makes a speaker go in and out. And you do that lots of times, and the speaker goes in and out fast enough that you start to hear notes. That's how sound works. Yikes! Tune that a bit. And if I want this to be 440 hertz concert pitch, then I can do a fine tune of 1, and I believe that will get it right. There's a tune tone somewhere, but the tune tone will not be at 440. The tune tone will be relative to the speed of the Amiga and the clock speed of the Amiga. And whether it's PAL or NTSC, and the kind of timer that you use, and none of that matters, doesn't matter. So, has a pretty manky sample. First thing I'm going to do is take a backup of it. I'm going to range the whole thing, range all. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to control arrow to the next sample location. And remember, it's just good practice to use these begin and end or click to say exactly where you want to paste. And so begin, paste, loop the whole thing, and don't forget to bring the volume up. I'm going to go back and take the fine tune off there because I don't care about being in tune with the rest of the world, as it were. So this is a bit shrill. We could get some way towards turning this into a square wave by boosting the hell out of it. I'll start with the volume. So I'm really just maxing out, clipping it. Actually, boost adds a bit of high end that we don't need. I'm gonna filter it. That's what I'm gonna do. Has that for some reason crashed this machine? Hey, there we go again. Do we get a guru? Do we get a guru? Yes, we get a guru. Hey. Right, so there we go. But that's okay. It's so easy for us to get that. I'm not sure if I trust this. I might switch it off at the wall and back on again. No, we'll see how it goes. I'm not giving up this time. So it's a fresh boot of Workbench. I'm not using any of this. Actually, while I'm here, I might as well show you another way to get chip samples in. Audio Master 2 is software that came, is software that came with a sampler, a hardware sampler. It has a config option for a Joyport sampler as well. I've never seen one of those in the wild. I'm not sure what they were like. We're not using any of that stuff today. We're just gonna bring this loop back to 0 because in this program, which I think is 1989, you can draw a waveform, and I think the idea was that you would chop out pops and crackles in sampled audio, but it wasn't long before people realized you could use it to make tiny waveforms. Amiga, I think it's right Amiga and H turns it into draw mode, and let's draw a big fat square like this. and I think it will loop if I just, yeah, it's a big fat square. Pretty easy. That's 64 bytes. Now I don't think Audiomaster will let you range or save anything shorter than that, but what it will do is export the loop points with an 8SVF. 8SVF, remember, is the format that Amiga PAL creates that we were working in last time. So normally I would try and range the data and then save the ranged data, but I'm never sure that I'm ranging exactly 64 bytes. So I'm going to see if I can save the waveform. And I'm going to live dangerously. I'm going to save it in RAM. So the RAM on the Amiga, unlike the RAM on a PC or a Mac, which you cannot be trusted with, usually. Nobody can be trusted without RAM for all sorts of good reasons. But on the Amiga, sure, yeah, have a RAM disk. That just, you stick stuff in there and your RAM goes down, you take it out and your RAM goes up again. That's great. And it's the fast RAM, the chip RAM that's built in with the custom chips. And so it's a nice temporary, what do you call it? Clipboard kind of thing for files and that. Usually these are all empty in RAM usually. Let's call it square1.smp. SMP is something I've made up because, as I keep saying, file extensions don't matter. And I'm going to tweak this square a little bit by just clicking and dragging, making that period a bit fatter. Save waveform, square 2. Bit more. You can probably tell what I'm going for here. This is what I always go for, which is a pulse width modulation kind of thing. I'll have one more, and it should be getting really squeaky. And now I'm going to bring it right back here, and I'm just going to mess it up a bit. Like that. See what happens with that. Okay, so that seems to have worked, kind of. I didn't try and get a 32. You know what, I'm going to... that's not the loop length though, is it? It's been a while. I normally do what I haven't covered yet, which is stealing samples. Normally from myself, sometimes from other people. But you should credit them if you do. Let's load Protracker again. We're effectively starting a new one. So I'm going to disk up again, and I did the right click, left click trick on that button to give me a list of all the devices, all the drives that are available to me, which include DH1 is a hard drive. DH0 is usually renamed once you've booted into something like Workbench, because that's where the operating system lives. Files is the same as DH1. CF128 is the compact flash card, which is here, which is how I get files quickly from the Mac to the Amiga, just by popping that out, sticking it in a USB card reader, drag and drop, really nice and easy, and cheap, which is good. And RAM disk is what we want. DFO is a floppy drive. This machine has no floppy drive at all. It's just got a hole here that I can stick my fingers in. We don't need floppy drives. Waste of time. So yeah, Audiomaster saved its instrument format, which has these loop points in. I think it's probably IFF or 8SVX. Probably IFF, more likely, which I think is was an Electronic Arts file format originally, that Apple used as well, or afterwards, and now IFF's a pretty common image file format. On the Amiga it was used for images, for audio samples, for a whole range of things. It's a container format. None of that matters. Here we go. Alt-S to get the sample editor up again. Let's get the first one in there. Shit the bed, I've done it again. I've loaded a sample as a module because clear all. Let's start again. Right, we're going to do this important thing here, which is switch from load module to load sample. And honest to God, it's happened again. Right. I'm not paying attention closely enough. Right. We're on load sample. Then, like I said at the beginning, reread every directory that we want to actually look in. There we go. That should just be a little click because it's not looping. There's nothing else going on with it. These all look suspiciously identical. I'm not too happy about that. By the way, it's annoying not having a scroll wheel in the Amiga. You can get scroll wheel mice for the Amiga, but Bossman Rift seems harder than it should be. Yeah, of course it is. Hey, welcome to Protracking with Syphus. Everything's harder than it needs to be. You can get scroll wheel mice for the Amiga and drivers that make it work. I'm pretty certain, I very much doubt they'd work in Protracker, because Protracker ignores the operating system almost entirely. It just looks right to the metal, right to the hardware registers. So I got 1, got 2, got 3, let's get 4. But you can make up for that to some extent by using the up and down arrows. When the disk op window is open, then up and down work in the disk op and not anywhere else. So you can, if you're previewing a lot of, if you're auditioning a lot of samples, keep one finger near a key, a volume key, like that, and then use your thumb and finger to go up and down the screen, and then use the mouse to click. So if you've got like 100 samples, that makes life much easier. It's almost as quick as scrolling with a mouse. That's the one I want. I want these SS, whatever the hell SS is. I can't remember. I haven't seen that. So I think what Audio Master's done is saved a few cycles of that waveform. But what I'm going to do is just get back to where I can see the ranges a bit. I'm going to go to Edit Up, and then I'm going to go to the third panel, and I'm going to look carefully at where I'm going to set my loop way along here to get the note that I actually want. Rajbi, to be honest, even though the clone has a scroll wheel, I wish I had a quick next or audition without having to click it. Unless there is one I haven't noticed. Nope. The only way to audition a sample is to load it in, I'm afraid. I've never seen a variant of Protracker that doesn't force that to happen. And I think that's probably because the way it allocates, the way it addresses hardware registers, mean that for it to play any sound, it has to kind of bring that sample into the whole edifice, and before it'll do anything with it. I think it can't abstract that kind of thing to a layer that isn't built into the tune. When you're hearing anything through Protracker, you're essentially using the replayer, and that is carved out and then shipped separately as a replayer that people can put in their software, their demos and stuff like that. So yeah, nothing quite so straightforward, sadly. But hey, I'm gonna get the notes. That sounds like it might be kind of like the note we wanted. So 40 hex is 64, that's on replay I'm looking at. So 80 should give us 128, which will upsample if we want to get that higher. Upsampling is something we didn't look at when we were doing complex, higher quality samples. If you have to up or down sample in that situation, then you probably should have done a better job of converting it beforehand. But usually with chip samples, you can upsample, downsample, and it's just duplicating each byte, and it doesn't do any harm to a sample that already sounds a bit ropey, let's face it, or just, you know, shrill and piercing. That's fine. So the point at which I've set that loop is 1B0, that's the position. So I'm going to do selections from 1B0 down to 0, and I'm going to cut them out. And I should end up with, this isn't an exact science, and I wish I could remember how I used to do this, but if anybody can remember using Audio Master to create this stuff, I'd be interested to hear from you. I'm going to load some of these samples back in, see what's going on. Sample 2, sample 2 SS, sample 1.s. Back to here, 180, cut that out. As long as they're all edited consistently, then you can make sure that the only variation between them is a variation that you wanted, which is probably just that the pulse period would increase gradually, like it is now. That's more like it. So I'm going for 180 as my position that I want to hit with the mouse before I drag back and cut everything else out. This one, not sure what I'm going to do with that. That's a wild card. We probably need to tab to a note column so we can hear stuff. If you ever can't hear something, that's usually the reason. You just need to tab a few times to get yourself to a column that's that will play a note. Ooh, there we go. Okay. Now we'll cut that up and tune it. Let's cut it to the same point. 180, I think. Right, now it's time to actually write some tunes. So these are quite, I'm going to keep one of those as a bass. An easier way of copying with all the settings intact is to find the empty sample slot, which is sample 6, go back to sample 1, which is going to be our bass, and go to edit up, and number 2, panel 2 on edit up, which you can also get to by cycling through Alt-E until you find the one you want. And then we're going to go from sample 1 to sample 6, and then we're going to click the top bar because we want this letter to change. You'd think, oh, we'll click that letter. No, that doesn't do it. You need to click the bar until it says not T for track, not P for pattern, but S for sample. And then we do a copy, and then it takes us to the sample 6, so we know, confirm that we've got that bass in that slot. Now we're going to go back to the one we copied from, which is sample 1. Alt-E again to get to the third sample editor, and we're going to do, just because it's a compulsive thing, I'm going to arrange all and copy before I do anything wave destructive, almost anything wave destructive. I'm going to upsample it. And I'm going to upsample it again. That might need fine tuning. Upsample this twice as well. 1, 2. I'm going to bring this up because I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it yet. I'm probably going to drop the volume on it and use it for maybe a softer slow arp or something like that. But let's get back to these first ones. Set a speed with F. Remember we did that last time. We'll set a speed of F4 and a BPM of F. No, not that. F80. It should give us 128 BPM. It's kicking out noise at him. Wasn't expecting it to kick out. It's peculiar. I'm going to save the module where it is now, because I don't have to put you all through that again. Before I do anything, I'm going to click on this arrow here so that we're on a loaded module and save module. And then I'm going to choose a drive to put it in, which is going to be Files, 2019 PWS, chop.mod, and save module, yes. So that is our mod.chipchop.mod. Protrack has added a prefix extension, which some other apps like, or liked way back. So most of my mods end up being called mod.something.mod because having the .mod extension at the end makes it easier to do things with on Mac or PC, or easier to group them and identify them. So let's get some notes played. So now that we've got a range of similar but slightly different square waves, we can start doing a bit of a tune. Let's get a slow kind of ostinato arp kind of thing going on. Pretty dull, but it's stuff happening. Back to the top, line 0, Control B, and then again to get the entire pattern or the entire track, we'll just do the up arrow once to get us to the bottom, Control C to copy the whole lot, and then F8 will, because the F keys, these ones, remember F6, 7, 8, 9, take you to quadrants of the pattern. So F6 goes to 0, F7 goes to 16, 32, 48, and we want to go straight after copying that block. I'll do it again. Command B, up, Command C to copy it. F8 gets us halfway down the pattern, and that's a weird flashing I haven't seen happen before. Control P pastes it in. Not Control V. Control V does something different. It spoils your life. It filters all your samples wave destructively. And now we've got the whole thing repeated twice. You can hear a little bit of distortion and craziness going on there. One of those notes is the very highest note period that Protracker can output. So if you go near there, don't hang around on that note too long. Definitely don't expect to be able to do anything interesting with it, like an arpeggio or an arpeggio command or pitch up or anything like that. You're at the upper limit. So all those notes are at full volume, and the first thing I want to do is to get a bit of pulse width modulation or sample and hold, or however you want to think of I want to mimic the idea that a filter would be changing, or the pulse width would be modulated, and that's easily done. We've got 4 samples to choose from here. The 5th, I think, is the weird one. No, I've got 5 samples. It's good to have loads of samples if you've got the space for them. Sometimes it does come down to like how many free bytes you have, but we're not worried about those restrictions tonight. I'm going to do Command 2, which sets the note skip or the edit skip to 2. That means every time I type in a note, it will jump that many lines down to the next one. And if I've got caps lock on, which I have, I get pattern repeat. So all I have to do is hold down a key to put loads of things in, but that's not what I need right now. What I need right now is the note skip, so all I have to do is put my fingers over the 1 to 5 keys and then just go nuts with them like that. Like I don't know what I'm doing, but hey, listen. So that's quite random. You can also do it sequentially. Let's go to the start again and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. So that should sound a bit more like it's been modulated on a sine wave LFO. Well, on some kind of recurring LFO anyway, where it goes in a linear way from the widest pulse width to the narrowest and back again. Sounds a bit dry and kind of lonely and weird, so let's get some ridiculous quantities of delay on it. Again, I've done the Command B, looped it upside down, Control C, and I'm going to go down, usually, depends on the kind of delay or the kind of, you can get something closer to a slapback surfy kind of delay, Beach Boys kind of thing, by just delaying it by 1 row. I love delay. I usually want it as big as I can get away with, so at the very least I like to go for an interval of 1, 2, 3 rows down. So what I'm going to do, the long way of doing this kind of thing, well, let's pretend I'm writing this again, get the edit skip back down to 0. I'll just do it as I would do it. And then I would start to put in the volume commands to drop some of those down. I made a bit of a mess of that, I'm afraid. And I would go at step 2, and I'd put a C command in every other line. And then I'd go down those C commands and I'd put 1 maybe in every other line to make that a C10, which means I'm about quarter volume. So every quiet note is a repeat of, so that C is a repeat of this C 3 lines above. That I'm a liar. Maybe I must. Anyway, that G is a repeat of that G. That oh god, I can't remember. Anyway, like I said, therapeutic. As long as you don't have to explain it to anybody. But that's not what we're going to do today. We're going to do the easy one, which is to copy all of that into the next pattern. Go 4 lines down. Well, we don't need to go 4 lines down. That will chop a few off the end, but that's okay. I'll paste the whole lot in here. I'll go down and do the C commands on everything. Let's do a C1. And copy that whole thing now. So that is a duplicate of track 1, but everything's at a much lower volume. Now, there's another way to do this, and that is to have duplicates of the samples, and each of the sample has a lower volume in its settings. That means you can save some space here. So if you had something important going on in the effects command that you wanted the note to have, to continue to have, like a vibrato or something, then you would maybe have to do it the other way, so that you don't have to waste those effect commands by having a C command in there, because the global volume of that sample will already be set lower. But right now we want to just use the same samples and have the same pulse width mod effect repeated a bit later. We've got it in the copy buffer, I hope. I'm going to do a Control K to delete everything that we don't need anymore from there. Now I'm going to go down the line at which we want the repeats, the line which will be the repeat, the delay time. So the delay time is how many lines from from 0 we're going to wait until we put the new one in. So quite a close but not horribly close one would be 3 empty slots. I'm going to do something again not everybody knows about. What's pretty handy is Control J, which is a merge paste. Now there haven't been any clashes here. It hasn't overwritten anything because there was an empty line between each note, and we've interlocked them at an offset of 3 lines, so that's okay. Let's have a listen. Muted. There we go. That sounds pretty cool. It's quite a subtle effect. That's how that works. Now, let's see if undo actually works. It does. Undo works. I never use it because I taught myself not to rely on it, but Control U does an undo in the pattern editor, not in the sample editor. Hey, Bossman Rift, hey, Andy. Yeah, it is much more fun typing in the delay, yeah. But Bossman Rift is right. The beauty is this old school magic is portable to my new school renoise. That's absolutely true. Renoise gives you more, I think unlimited, or at least 64 effects tracks in which you can do volume. But you also got volume and panning columns as well, so you can stick them in there. But if you absolutely want to replicate the way this effect works, it will let you do that, and that's cool. I've done that on occasion. Let's go for a much longer delay time by going down to line 5 and then pasting that. It should still be in the buffer. Nope, because I shouldn't have done a paste. I should have done Control J, merge paste. So obviously it sounds less fluid because we're chopping the note, and we we'll undo that again. If we've got a whole channel to spare, we can do it in 2 channels, and if you do it in 2 channels, then that's great. You can just do this. That sounds lovely. Or you can push this out a bit. No, let's stick that in there, number 3, and then let's use another channel. That nudge shortcut, sorry, that is Shift and Return, nudges everything down, and if it goes over the bottom of the pattern, you lose it. And then Shift and Backspace nudges everything back up. That's note and effects. For anybody who hasn't been in on previous streams, when I say effect, I'm talking about the command that lets you do things that are not DSP things. They're just mixer time shuffling of the buffer. It's not usually timing based things. Still not DSP. I'm not cheating, don't worry. But yeah, the effects column and the note column are both moved by that nudge, either up or down. And so I'm going to kill that. I'll put that in again on there. So typically when you put in a pattern delay on a separate channel or on the same channel, you'll notice that if you were looping this around, you've got a bit of a dead spot up here. So if you know it's going to be on a loop, and if you know that this will have been heard in the previous pattern and in the next, then you go back and you manually add the bit that you've lost, either by just doing it by hand or by doing a mark of the bottom line and then looping around at the top, going to your repeat channel, moving down a line and sticking it in here, making sure you put C1 command in there. That will sound weird the first time, but when we loop around, it'll sound clean because your ear will know it's a delayed note from the bottom of the pattern on the loop. Yeah, so that's how to do that. But I'm gonna kill all of that. I'm gonna stick it in here. Fuck, I did it again. Excuse me. I'm going to do a merge paste. Oh, I lost it, didn't I? Never mind. Do it quickly. Command 2, note repeat, zoom. Get it all in the buffer, get it killed, get it merge pasted. There we go. So yeah, it's unnecessarily time consuming, but if you've been doing it a long time, you get the muscle memory and you can do that kind of thing quite quickly. Let's get that bass in. Whoa, so that does need tuned. No, that mustn't be an even doubling of the length. I'm not sure why that went so wrong. Maybe there was a rounding error in the way the loop point was set or something. What's 2C times 2? I'm going to get my calculator out. Scientific mode. Programmer. 2C times 2 is 58. Yeah. So that's weird. Did I do it twice? Oh god, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Let's mute the original, the first track with that slow ARP going on. And so I'm sticking in an A command here. A is a very fast, low resolution volume slide down. When it's A0, it's a volume slide down. When it's A something 0, it's a volume slide up. So A is the name of the command, where the pink thing is. That is the first parameter, that is the second parameter. If the first parameter is set to anything other than 0, then it's a volume slide up. If the second parameter is set, the first one is 0, then it's a volume slide down. So an example, set to edit step 1, put a bunch of A's in. We should get a not that smooth, but smoothish volume slide down like that. Speed that up a bit with a higher number. That means it's dropping the volume by a greater amount every line. So A05, you're probably going to lose the entire volume within a few lines at this speed. at this BPM. That's cool. Typically, if I want a bass with a quite fast release, if you think in terms of ADSR, attack, decay, release, sustain, release, an AOA is going to drop it to in a way that gives you a decay and then a sustain that will hang on, because you're not now doing anything else with the note. You've given it a volume drop, but then you haven't done anything else, so it'll play on the volume it gets to for ages. You could do 2 of those, or you could just do A0F, which is the highest you can get that to go, and that's an infinite release. Let's do AOA, and that means we can start to so often if you want to distinguish the notes in a bass line, an A command is a good way of separating them out a bit, give them a bit of dynamic fall off so that you can hear when a new one's starting, otherwise it's going to be a wall of sound. I'm sure this isn't quite in tune yet, but we'll do for now. And I'm not listening to the tune at all. Just quickly getting all these volume slide commands in. I'll duplicate this. So we've got a bass line happening there, and we've got a bass line that's not doing very much of interest, which is fine, because a bass line that is serving its purpose without getting fancy is a bass line that you can interrupt with other things like drum hits and stuff. Yeah, I'll solo the bass. I tend not to put a delay on a bass in a chiptune. It just tends to sludge usually, and I'm not that happy with this bass because I'm not exactly sure what's going on with the tuning of it. I'm not. Probably something to do with the way I resampled it. Yeah, the A command is really handy. It's a blunt instrument, which is usually what you use in a chiptune. If you want a really smooth fade, then let's start with a C0. I mentioned last time the E commands. E is where everything else goes that doesn't have its own command, but usually you get a variation of a command that exists in the rest of the alphabet, or the rest of the series of effects. So the A command has an E version, which is EA. I think it's EA. Andy will correct me if it's not. Let's get a bunch of these in. Did I do this last time? I was on this last time. Anyway, and then that's fine volume slide up. That should be much finer. There we go. So if you really want to fade in there's no global fade in feature in Protracker, so if you want to fade everything in from nothing, then EA1 is usually how you'd have to do it. It's usually how I would fade in a big pad in a drum and bass tune. I would use that for a lot more control, especially at high speeds, because if you use the A command in a pattern that's going at 170 BPM and the lines are flying past quickly, that A command will run out of steam in seconds rather than 10 seconds, you know. It's all relative to the speed you're running the tune at, but that gives you a lot more control. We don't need control now though, we need chiptunes. So it's quite a leisurely kind of pace for a chiptune, but it's a good way of demonstrating some of these techniques. Have I accidentally done a filter all samples or something? Because this sounds really... I mean, it's an Amiga 600, so it doesn't sound great. It hasn't had the audio mod done on it. I'll go back to 1200 for the next chiptune session. Alright, I think I turned the filter on somehow, but we're back to normal. So where's that weird sample that I had that I wasn't sure what to do with? Yeah, I've got you handy. So I want to be able to go higher with that and go back to sample editor and edit up, and gonna copy the whole thing first, range all and copy into the buffer just in case it doesn't do what I want. I'm normally not using upsample and downsample for chip samples. I've normally got myself a bit better prepared, or I've just stolen some of my own old samples or somebody else's. I think these must be an odd number. I don't know what's going on here, because that doesn't sound. So I'm going to save a bit of space for all the fun stuff we might or might not want to do in the other channels by sticking a few ups in here. So there's my up sample. Excuse me, there's my up sample. Actually, I want to exchange samples. And you'll tell me, probably, any 7 will tell me if, yeah. If doing an exchange also swaps the channel numbers in the pattern. I'm pretty sure it does, but I don't do this. Don't usually need to, but I want to make life a bit easier. I want to exchange 5 for 6. I'm happy to feel like, yeah, I think possibly, maybe. Let's find out. It's a learning experience. I want to swap 5 and 6. Sample, record samples, S is on there, exchange. No, didn't. Brilliant. Thanks, Protracker. Not what I wanted. Hey, different use cases. I'm sure somebody had a use case where the other thing made sense. Let's get back to where we were. Okay, so it doesn't matter. That's a sample I want to use for my ARP. I'm going to boost it a little bit because there's nothing subtle about this. Do volume. Going to arrange the whole thing. Actually, no, I'm going to copy to an empty sample. 5 to 7 on here. 5 to 7. Copy. Now we've got the new one. I'm going to drop the volume of that up here to 20. It's half the volume. Maybe a bit more, maybe 1B, let's see how that goes. So, I'm going to do our first ARP. ARP command is 0, so all you have to do is type in numbers in a blank effect and you've got your ARP. The numbers you type in are semitone intervals from the note that is in the note section. So the note we've got here is C. The next semitone we put in is going to be, we're going to do a minor triad. So the next one is going to be 3 semitones up, or an interval of 3. It's going to, anyway, a third interval, so it's going to be 3 semis. Anyway, that's how you get a minor third arpeggio command. There we go. All right. So you'll get into the habit, if you do this a lot, of knowing that 4/7, 0/4/7 will give you a major triad like this. And then once you've got some of those stored away in muscle memory, C's good. C's always an octave. But this note is too high pitched already to get an octave. If I drop the pitch like that, that's very handy to have. You can do lots of really nice chirpy stuff with an octave without having to influence the chord progression of the tune in a certain way. Nice and ambiguous. Let's put it back to 3/7, 0/3/7 for a minor triad. Right, boss man, thank you for watching. Good night. I don't think we'll get all the chip stuff I want to talked about tonight, so there'll be more chip things going on. What we can do here is a really fast delay effect by just giving the second note, repeating it. Actually, we could delete that note, but put the 7 sample command in there, which will so that'll give us a similar kind of decay to the decay that we've got on the bass. So the bass hits and then immediately decays to a sustain. This is doing the same. I'll show you it by itself. Let's run that harp on a bit longer, and then we'll do a 7 sample command. We don't need the note in there. We don't need to re-trigger the note. Doesn't matter when it's a chip sample. There's nothing interesting happening along the length of that waveform. It's just looping around. So maybe it's easier to just stick the note in again. So already we've got the effect of an ADSR envelope going on that note. A note that starts punchy and then suddenly drops a little bit, just like the bass is doing. And we've got that effect going on in a very short space of time in the channel that I muted. And because we've always got a gap here, we can fit that in again. Let's copy it and paste it in here on the 12. B might not be the interval I'm looking for. I thought it might work, but it's not really working. So the bass is doing its own thing, which means that we don't have an evenly spaced empty space for that repeat to drop into. Is this just a loop around? Let's just copy down to there and then paste it in so we don't lose that. I want that note to be a lot lower. I realise what I've done. I made another blunder there, but that's cool because, yeah. So drum samples, yeah, you can make drum samples out of noise, that's fine, but I usually like to use something that's a little bit more distinguishable as a drum, at the expense of a few more bytes, usually not very many, especially if it's a snare. Let's save that module and let's go into sample load, read a disk again, look in the samples, and we're definitely on sample mode, yeah. Got some drum machine samples from the upper rough pack kicking around here somewhere. Maybe I don't. Maybe they're on the compact flash card. Up drum kits, there we go. Now that's quite pricey in terms of disk space cost, but we could probably resample that and get some of the. Doesn't need that much of a tail on it either. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to see how we can optimize that a little bit. We don't need anything as fancy as this. Again, we'll mangle that a bit. Let's cut that off. Let's fade that out. Fade down. Well, we could get a bass out of that, or we could stick a bit of that at the front of our bass. Subi211 says loop it and save even more, sure. So this is, let's see, what do I need to do? Do I need to resample that at a, I'll copy that first and resample it at a lower note, and then I've done this backwards. That's still actually taking up as much space as it did. well, the other option is I don't think I've ever made a chip drum sample from scratch other than with noise or other things. There are a lot of those that came from the original ST floppy disk sample packs that came with Sound Tracker, and then were expanded and continued for hundreds and hundreds of mostly unofficial discs. There are archives of them out there somewhere if you want. People have converted them to WAV. You can use them in modern things. There's some crazy samples. They're amazing. And we'll do a whole session or multiple sessions on making tunes purely with what came on the ST00, ST01, the first couple of discs. I'm going to go to my load module again. We're going to lose our module for now, but it's okay because we saved it, because we're really clever and careful. I'm going to steal from myself. One of mine from many years ago. That's nice and gnarly and very small. So back to the disc up, and let's call that chip kick, and we're going to stick it. Go to the load sample window. I'm going to stick that in RAM disk because we're still living dangerously. This isn't that wise, but it's okay. Sample, you sure? Yes. Save that in RAM. Oh, that's a nice bass. It's got a click at the front, which is quite percussive. Yeah, okay. Right, let's get back to the load module. Let's get the tune we were working on, which is in here, chip chop. Now we're back. Empty sample slots here. Alt D to get back to the disc up again. Switch back to load sample. We're going to read, just to be sure, we're going to read the RAM disk again. Chip kick. Good, good, good. It's volume 0, but that's okay. We'll go to the next sample and put it in chip snare, also volume 0. No, it's not, it's just on an empty or a muted track. So we've got them there. So then we can start sticking in some drums. And we haven't really gone on an efficiency drive yet, except for getting that up in the same place as the bass. I'll go D-beat on this and yeah, let's do that. No, it'd be fun to shake this up a bit, but let's keep it nice and leisurely. That's a pretty boring drum pattern, but it's okay. And keeping your drum pattern simple in a chiptune is usually good planning, because later on you might want to use some of those spare lines to get yet more delay, or even just bits of ARP and things that you think might pad it out nicely or make it sound a bit crazier or something. And then we haven't really got a... We could pick one of these and decide, well, this is going to be our lead line. What I would sometimes do here is go back and swap out all of these samples with something a little bit more high-pitched and lower the volume a bit to put them in the background as a slow ARP, and then use the samples that we're using now as something more melodic. And really it's with the melody that, God, it's 10 to 11. Can't go on too much longer tonight, but I think maybe another session for chip melodies, because that's where you really demonstrate, that's where I can demonstrate some of the other... oh God, I'll just mute that and then I'll put in a bunch of stuff quickly and then I'll show you what I've done. That's much too fast. Even that's much too fast. Let's mute it and see what's going on. So firstly, we're starting this melody with a sort of a grace note, appoggiatura, a lead in, a slide up to the note from a semitone below. Various terms for that musically, but here we're using the tone Portamento command, which is 3. We're using quite a low value, but we're repeating that 3 times. So 3 3s at this speed and rate is usually enough to get it up to the pitch you want. If I took some of them out, it would only get part of the way from this to this. So the first note, we're triggering the sample. There's the note, and there in the pink box is the sample, which is 3. Second note, we're triggering pitch, but not retriggering the sample. Instead, we are just doing the tone portamento, which will start to take the original pitch that was played up to the new one that's just appeared on this line at the rate that you dictate in the command's parameter. And actually, that is enough to do it. 1 wouldn't be. 3 ones isn't quite enough. 3 twos gets you there nice and leisurely. This whole piece has a pretty languid, slow feel to it. And then I've got some. I forgot to put my other parameter in there. 4 is vibrato command. Do they call it? There's a tremolo one which nobody ever uses, which I won't bother telling you about. Vibrato is 4, tremolo is 7. Vibrato gives you frequency or rate and depth on the 2 parameters. So 4 is the name of the command. 1 here is the rate where a lower number is faster, I think. Let's find out. Yeah, a lower number is faster. And 4 is the depth of that modulation, so the distance in terms of wavering the pitch up and down from the original note you go. So I've got a C in here. It starts to get ridiculous. Or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. I just do what I normally do. 2 4 2 feels right plus a bit. So fine plus a bit too much, which is just right. Chiptunes. And then Protracker will remember that command, and if you just put an empty 4 elsewhere, it will continue at whatever settings you put in last. So I stick it in here, and you'll hear it at length. No, that is, maybe I do want that faster, 4A4, yeah. Yeah, so that's a faster rate, but I want a slightly 4A2. Yeah, I'm happier with that. 602 is it's vibrato and volume slide. It's not one I use that often, but if you're really running out of space, sometimes you need to do 2 things in one command, and also you need to do it in such a way that you would normally have to have put that command in earlier, higher up in the pattern data, and there might not be any space for you to do that. So this is all about cheating your way around the fact that we've only got 1 column of commands. Now, I don't know why we haven't got more than 1 column of commands. It was probably originally how many characters you could fit on the screen when Carsten Nabarski wrote Sound Tracker. There are other trackers, plenty of other trackers have got multiple columns. Octamed has, I think, at least 2, and in most versions, which is why those guys have got effects to burn. The offset time stretch command that we looked at last time. Limitation does breed creativity, you're right. Kato was saying last time that a lot of Amiga junglists use that a lot in Octamed because they've got all these spare commands available, and why wouldn't you rinse that? Yeah, so the 6-2, it's vibrato and volume slide, so you can continue or drop a volume slide. I think it will always continue with vibrato that's already been set, and then I think it's similar to the E. No, not the E, the A. The E, the A. E. So that should slide up, maybe. But I have to start low. I can't start. Never mind. So that's continuing the vibrato, the 6 here, continuing the vibrato and doing a volume down, A. And if we were on a quiet sample and we wanted to do a volume slide up at the same time as a vibrato, then we'd stick A's in the first character of that command, and it would just make them mad loud. Let's try and demonstrate that. So I dropped the volume with C10 just before that effect kicked in, and then CAA brought it up while doing the vibrato there. So Subi 211, that depends on the pitch of the note. I'm not sure, sorry I missed that, I'm not sure which bit that was about, but if it was about anything relating to timing, tick rate, pattern speed and any of that, then yes. The value for the value for 3. It depends on the interval between the two notes a lot, because it takes time to get from one sample period, which is how Protracker thinks. It doesn't really think in terms of notes. It'll take more time to get from one to the other. So if it's a semitone like this, it shouldn't take long, even at relatively low speeds. But if I wanted to do a pattern slide of, I'll fix that, hang on. Get another pattern on the go here so we can so we're going to jump from one note to the next, take away the second sample command. We're still at the same speed and tempo, so 3 command with no parameters in, doesn't have any slide speed, so it doesn't go anywhere. 3A will go a little bit, but we're not continuing it there, so let's continue it. Hey, catchphrase. And let's go a bit faster with that. So it'll reach the target note more quickly at an earlier line, the faster that thing works. That's ridiculously fast. It's fairly fast. And we'll have more fun with this when we do doskpop. Yeah, later trackers use that for autopilot. I'm going from C1 to C. It takes a certain different amount of ticks from going from C2 to. Yeah, that's true. Not all frequency is logarithmic, not linear. So the commands you will have to use there entirely vary on where in the scale you are, and the exact pitch, not the relative pitch, the actual pitch of your start note and your target note. Well pointed out, Subi 211. And there's always an element of trial and error with the 3 command, as there should be, till you get it right. You want to just fine tune it to your own purposes. Now that is going, I think that's gone beyond the target note. It's lower, so I think that's not quite up to where it should be. It feels a bit sharp. That's always, I'm not going to be happy with that. It doesn't matter, I wouldn't normally ring it out that long. I think I should wind it up. I mean, we've got almost a pattern of a chiptune on the go. I've gone the long way around the houses at nearly every point, as I always do. But hopefully that will get some of the ins and outs of Protracker to stick with you a bit. And oh, I think I was right. I'm tired of my headphones and shit or something. No excuse for that. Am I going mad? Why is that? It sounds so out of tune. Maybe it's everything else that's going on. Anyway, thank you Thank you both. So it's the beginnings of a chiptune. It's the beginnings of quite a gloomy, gothy chiptune by chiptune standards. Honestly, I get that all the time, and I presume you're talking about the late night paranoia that everything you thought you knew about frequency and is wrong, and yeah, sometimes I have like a day when I can't tune my violin. I have essentially perfect relative pitch when I'm tuning an instrument, especially an instrument that resonates in a certain way, and you can tell if the thing that's held against you isn't reverberating the way it should, or on a guitar, or you can tune against the harmonics and stuff like that. Sometimes you have a bad day, or I have a bad day, a bad ear day, and my E string will just never, ever, ever be right. Sometimes I just have to crank it all the way down, tune it up from scratch again, and then you just start doubting yourself. And even if there was something wrong originally, you might just lose that mojo. And I've done entire gigs when it's not been right, and I've known that, and nobody else has cared, but it just becomes your problem and not anybody else's. Yeah, you're right. It sounds sharp and you load it up again and it's not, but only if 24 hours have passed. Yeah, good night's sleep will do it. Cool. So thank you for staying with me while I work through some of that. Hopefully I've been able to show along the way some examples of process and workflow, because that's what this is really all about. This was never meant to be a step-by-step tutorial. I don't think it's... there are some tutorials out there. In fact, there's a video series done by somebody whose name I can't remember. He's in Wasp, I think he's called. Yeah, Wasp. There's a playlist on YouTube. He goes through all the Protracker effects commands. That's really worth a watch. And that's really good for a canonical breakdown of exactly what these effects are doing. I'm hoping, and I'm sure I've got details wrong, and I'm happy to be corrected and all the rest. Some things work the way I think they do, or some things maybe I think I know the way they work, but that's just because of how I use them, and actually they're doing something slightly different, and I've never explored their full potential, perhaps, who knows. I just want to show some workflow and demonstrate how I would do it, and some other ways of doing things. And I've done some things tonight that aren't how I would normally do it, which is one of the reasons it's taken so long. Especially that Audio Master thing, which I have done many years ago and never since. Because I think I always thought, I'll just steal some, or just load in some binary and do it myself. Or use Fast Tracker or Multi Tracker or something. So yeah, considering how many Amiga chiptunes I've written, and this is just some of them, that's a huge chunk of them. A lot of them recycle, or started out recycling chip samples from somewhere else or from another tune. I mean, actually these ones, Chip Attack, Chip Off, Chip Aloud, Chip Bottomless, Chip Siri, I think that was just the same, Turbo Chip as well. I think it was just the same module that I just saved without any pattern data 6 times and decided, right, I'm going to write a bunch of tunes using the same samples. So I'm pretty certain, pretty sure they're all the same sample set. So what's going on here? Been a long time since I wrote this. So here that's unusual for me actually, I'm combining the arps with the bass. The bass is on the backbeat, so the kick drums on there. Oh, that's just drum pattern. Okay. That big fat arp that doesn't care. And then these are just supplementary little arpy bits thrown in here. See, that's the 0cc I showed you before. That's the octave. C is 12 in hex, so C is 12 semitones up. That's an octave. And doing the 2 gives you a nice chirp that goes between 1 hit of the original note and then 2 of the octave up. See, 2. Slightly different character if you do 0C0. And then a bit of juggling around at the bottom for that. So yeah, I think the rest of those tunes are all pretty much the same samples. Similar. I'm juggling bass and arps there again. So it's very similar slow arp to the one that we were doing tonight. I often go for those. So not quite the same as the last one. I'm mixing those extra supplementary arps in with the drums, but there's space for them because the drum's quite sparse. So I think at the start we had, I don't know if I showed this earlier, but when we were talking about fade-ins, you can start a note playing at 0 volume, like I am here, and then I've got, so at line 48 the note has been triggered at 0 volume, can't be heard. Then we've got the vibrato command, 8-2, and then only then do we start upping the volume and simultaneously keeping the vibrato going. And 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5. So what I'm doing is getting a the curve is, I'm not describing this very well. It's not a linear curve. It's it is a steeper incline towards the end of that, and log-ish. Thank you. It's log-ish. It's logarithmic-ish for a certain logarithm that I couldn't describe to you because I don't have the mathematical vocabulary. If I run that unmuted, then yeah. Gets us in. It's a nice way of getting in with your tremolos and stuff ready to go. Yeah, so I keep saying I'll call it, and I will call it there. I'll maybe queue up one more tune to play. Maybe I'll play Olden Days. It's not a chip tune. No, it's not. I'm just gonna have chips. I did say it was chip tunes only tonight. Turbo chip. Not quite like this one. Well, I'll say thank you and good night for Protracking with Syphus, and I hope some of it was interesting, hope some of it helps, hope you write some chip tunes on anything. It doesn't have to be on Protracker, it doesn't have to be on the Amiga, but some of these things we've looked at are ways of doing things that kind of originated from the limitations of Karsten-Nowbarski's sound tracker in 87 or 8, whatever it was, 7 I think, and then persisted into Protracker, sound tracker, noise tracker. and then made reappearances in stuff like AHX Tracker by Pink, which is a synth tracker. It is a chip synth tracker that runs on the Amiga without samples, although it kind of pre-calcs the samples and then runs filters and software and stuff. That's very cool. We'll do a session on that sometime. And then a lot of those commands and ways of doing things made it into Little Sound DJ on the Game Boy, and were expanded on enormously. The developer of Little Sound DJ, I think, modeled some bits of it at least on AHX. I think he had been an AHX user, and definitely a lot of the commands came from the conventions laid down by Protracker for C being volume and stuff. Some of them changed over time, but there was a lot of influence there. So although I never really spent enough time doing stuff in Little Sound DJ, it did make sense to me the first time I turned it on, because I was like, okay, well, it's Protracker on a Game Boy, kind of. And yeah, MPVJ, hi there. Chip music is so beautiful. You're right, it is so beautiful. Andy, thank you for mentioning it to your students today. I don't know if that violates your duty of care, but it's very kind of you all the same. I hope nobody's ears have been damaged. I hope the levels have been okay. Sorry for my sidechain compressor turning my gulps of carbonated beverage into interruptions. Oh, thank you for the kind words, Rob. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to run this this tune for a while, and then wind it up. Thank you again. Good night.